Welcome to the Jamal Thomas morning. Well, it's not in the morning, but welcome to the Jamal Thomas show. I'll go with that. I'm glad that you guys can join me. I am here with a very great guest that I asked to be on. He graciously accepted, Professor Mohammad Marandi. He is Professor of English Literature and Orientalism at the University of Tehran. Professor, thank you for joining me. I really do appreciate it, especially with everything that's going on currently.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's always a pleasure.
I am very curious on Iran's perspective in regards to what's happening right now. There is a point of view. I think I've said before, I've been somewhat cynical in regards to these talks. And the reason I've been cynical because I've seen how the US has dealt with the countries over the last several years. The Wesley Clark thing, they're going after every country, with Iran being the last country standing. Trump is surrounding himself with a bunch of neocons. And I had a bit of hope, despite the cynicism, because Witkoff goes over, and it sounds like in the very beginning that Witkoff is being very reasonable in what Witkoff is saying. Witkoff gets attacked here in the United States by several neocons, and he changes his tune. After he changes his tune, Rubio is the one who's having the conversations, and Rubio takes a maximalist approach. A maximalist approach, by the way, that Iran has already said was a red line and was never going to be accepted. And so my take was, my feeling, I'll say it that way, was that this was a playbook, that the objective was we're going to have a conversation, we're going to make the negotiations look like they're legitimate from the US side, but at some point we're going to blow up negotiations in order to create a pretext and a justification for attack, kind of like weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. How is Iran seeing this? What is their frame of reference? Because I saw the foreign minister's comments, and his comments were effectively, how do you have a drunken alcoholic Hegseth screaming that the US is going to attack Iran at the time and place of our choosing, while also supposedly being in negotiations with that same country and blaming Iran for Houthi attacks that they have not been able to pacify? What is Tehran thinking about this? What is the conversation taking place in Iran regarding all of this?
I don't think anyone has an answer to that question because there are no answers right now about what's going on in the White House and around Trump. Trump has made different comments and statements about Ukraine. He's flip-flopped. Now he's giving weapons again to Ukraine, whereas he was going to end the war in 24 hours. He was behind the ceasefire in Gaza through Witkoff, and we were told that Witkoff read the Riot Act on a Saturday to Netanyahu. Literally days later, Trump allowed Netanyahu to starve Gaza again. He said that Palestinians must be ethnically cleansed, and he gave the green light for the genocide, all in contrast to what, and in contradiction with what Witkoff negotiated. So whether it's a negotiated deal like in Gaza or for Gaza, or whether it's promises to end the war, we constantly see him flip-flopping. And so with Iran, we can't expect anything different. Even with the trade war, we see how he and his men are flip-flopping, and how no one knows exactly where the markets are going to go unless there's people close to them who are doing insider trading or something like that. But ordinary people and business people across the world, and especially in the United States, they have no real idea where things are going to go. Even companies who are wondering if they should stay in China or should try to leave China, they can't decide because they don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Right.
So when you take all that into account, I think it's really impossible for anyone in Iran to give some definite answer to such a question.
That's fair.
My assumption,
No, please. I'm
my
sorry.
assumption, my guess, let me put it this way. My guess is that the Iranians are definitely preparing for some sort of military conflict, but they are negotiating at the same time for two reasons. One is to see if there's a possibility for a deal, if the United States is prepared to accept Iran's sovereign rights. And another reason is that Iran wants global South, the global majority, global public opinion, which is no longer controlled by Western media and Western narratives. They want them to understand that Iran is not the side that's walking away from the table, that
Right.
Iran is not the problem. Iran wants to isolate the United States as much as possible, which is a much easier task today than it was a few years ago, because the United States has now created enemies across the world through the trade war, through its even its allies have been marginalized. So the negotiation, Iran will not be the side that leaves the negotiating table. Iran will let the Americans do that. But at the same time, the Iranians are not going to be flexible in the way in which its sovereignty is compromised.
Mm-hmm.
So I have no idea what's going to happen, because anyone's guess is as good as mine.
Yeah, it's a tough one. And you're right. Iran has been an honest negotiator with us. And even now, when the US hadn't planned any kind of follow up meetings for the third round of talks or fourth round of talks, even then, I think Arghachi, the foreign minister, has been very political in the way that he said this has been postponed. There have been other reasons, et cetera. Meaning he's being very political in the way that he's talking about something. Whereas coming out of the US, you have tweets by Hegseth. I strongly believe he was on something as he was writing tweets saying he's going to attack Iran. And keep in mind, he is an alcoholic, from my understanding. But
Yeah, I agree. It is quite possible that he was drunk, or he was not.
he was
He was
humiliated. He was
under
humiliated.
circumstances when he did that tweet.
Yeah.
I think that's possible.
Well, he was humiliated. So the United States has been trying to pacify Ansar Allah, the Houthis, and have not been able to do it. He's head of the Pentagon. He's under pressure as head of the Pentagon. And you have $1 trillion military budget, and you can't, affect your will on this group in this smaller country. That's humiliating. And so that tweet was coming in that context where, they had just lost a ship in the Red Sea from the USS Truman. Like, all of this stuff is happening within a context, and they are blaming Iran for what the Houthis are doing. Now, there is.
And now Ansarullah has struck the
Airport.
International Airport, which it hurts the Israeli regime, because foreign airlines are going to discontinue flights. People will be discouraged from flying to Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
So they were supposed to be able to destroy their missile and drone capabilities, and this was probably the most effective strike yet, hitting the heart of the regime's economy.
Yeah, it killed several Israelis. THAAD system wasn't able to take the missile down. Iron Dome wasn't able to take the missile down. So again, another deep humiliation by the U.S., who's supposed to. Trump came out at one point saying, "We have pacified the Houthis. We've already done this," and you still have them, firing. So I guess my thing is, there was Project for a New American Century under George Bush, where the whole point was to reshape the Middle East using American power. There are also policy documents coming out of places like the Brookings Institute, if I remember correctly, Path to Persia, that talks about doing exactly what they're doing now. We're going to negotiate. At some point, we're going to blow up the negotiations. We're going to make it look as if we did everything we could, and then we're going to justify an attack. I would imagine Iran has to know this because they published all of it. So when the media in Iran is talking about this, or the political class, what have they been saying openly in regards to their point of view?
Yes, I think everyone recognizes that there's a possibility for a U.S. strike on Iran. The problem for the United States, though, is that it would be very risky.
Yes.
First of all, neighbors of Iran are not going to let the United States use their airspace. If they do, they'll pay the ultimate price. So the Americans can't attack Iran from the Persian Gulf, and they can't attack Iran from the north or the east. So they have to come from the Indian Ocean. That would be the Diego Garcia air base. And that is 5,000 kilometers to central Iran, the flight. And that would be those planes, those B-52s, those B-2s would be very vulnerable. They would have to have escorts, so there would have to be planes in the Indian Ocean taking off from aircraft carriers, I suppose, to accompany them. I think some of these jets could be brought down by the Iranians, and the soldiers taken as POWs. And the Iranians have many options. They can fire, the Iranians have, I think, over 300 underground bases spread out across the country, and they can fire missiles and drones at will at American interests. And American interests are not necessarily just military. They have all sorts of interests in the region, economic interests, and therefore they are deeply vulnerable. So it would be very costly for the United States to carry out a strike. It wouldn't be very effective because a few planes taking off from Diego Garcia, I mean, what could they possibly do? Right now, Ukraine and Russia have been at war for well over 3 years. The Russians are bombing Ukraine day and night. They're firing missiles and drones. And even though Russia is bigger and it's winning the war, but still after over 3 years, Ukraine is still there. So the point is that just a few airstrikes are not going to change anything. And Iran is in a stronger position than the Americans, because the Americans are going to have to take the risk by bombing Iran. They could lose jets, they could lose pilots. And then the Iranians can easily strike back at a host of they have tens of bases across the region, the Americans, and they have interests across the region, and they have no idea where Iran is going to strike, what Iran is going to strike, and with what it will strike. So I don't see this as ending well for the United States. Trump said that he's going to deal with the Ansarullah in Yemen and the Yemeni armed forces. And he failed. He failed miserably. They've been losing very expensive drones. They've been slaughtering ordinary people in Yemen, but having absolutely no impact on the military capabilities of Ansarullah. And today we saw Ansarullah strike at the heart of the Israeli regime. So Yemen compared to Iran, the Iranian power is infinitely greater. And American assets are all around Iran. If you just look at the Persian Gulf, U.S. assets are everywhere. It's not just military. The U.S. has companies, the U.S. has businesses, they're everywhere. So a strike on Iran, it would be, in my opinion, a defeat for the United States. And Jamal, if the Americans thought that they could successfully strike Iran and get away with it, they would have done it time after time after time over the last couple of decades, even when Iran was much weaker than today. Let's go back to, let's say, like 2003, when the United States had Afghanistan and Iraq, and they had literally surrounded Iran. Did they attack the country? No. Why? Because it's too big and too strong. Years later, when Iran was busy fighting ISIS, which the Americans created. The Americans created, and Erdogan was the man carrying out the Obama Timber Sycamore operation,
Hmm.
Erdogan and Abdullah and Jordan and the Qataris were paying for it, and so were other countries in the Persian Gulf. But Qatar was doing the most for ISIS and Al Qaeda back then. So Iran was busy fighting them. Iran was under maximum pressure. It was at a time when the Russians and the Chinese were not as let's say they were not they were they were not as strong as they were today. They were not as firm with the United States as they are now back then. So when the Americans wanted to impose sanctions on Iran at the UN Security Council, the Russians and the Chinese would try to water them down,
Right.
but they wouldn't block them. Now the Russians and the Chinese are very close to Iran. So Iran has global allies. Iran's regional relations are much stronger. Iran's drone and missile capabilities today are infinitely superior to what they were a decade ago. Iran is not surrounded. And Iran has been able to deal with the maximum pressure sanctions in a way in which they have significantly less impact today than they did 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago. So I don't see a scenario where the Americans could win. And I think that if the Americans had, as I was saying, if the Americans thought that they could attack and get away with it, they would have done it many times already.
I agree with everything you just said. I think that's a rational take, and I've heard people make that rational take. But I wouldn't put rationality above Donald Trump's ego. And
Absolutely.
the fact that Trump has spent the last several months screaming, screeching at the top of his lungs that he's going to attack Iran, he's going to attack Iran. They're very nice people. They're very nice people. If I don't get a deal, I'm going to attack. And they have pulled out of negotiations, and they've used Ansar Allah as an excuse, basically blaming Iran for those attacks, which is outrageous, right? I guess my thing is, it in their minds, they can come up with what they consider to be limited strikes that may not escalate further, because that's the way people think, right? Well, we could do this in a limited fashion, and their response is also going to be limited because of our limited thing. Like, I can see them thinking of this. And I'm also stuck with this idea that people are policy. And so if you surround yourself with Zionists and whack jobs that are in Trump's ear constantly escalating the demands, it gives me pause. And I guess
And it's not just people on uh, surrounding him, it's his opponents as well. Kerry, who did the negotiations with Iran on behalf of the Americans in 2015, and when they had the nuclear deal, the JCPOA, he wrote an article saying that you have to be tough with Iran. I think that Trump's opponents also want conflict because they want him to get a bloody nose. So they're saying that no, you can't have a nuclear deal like the JCPOA, even though Iran is not going to accept the JCPOA. It's not nearly enough for Iran. Iran's nuclear technology today is far more advanced, and Iran's gone through years of sanctions. So Iran is not going to give up what it's achieved over the past few years. But Kerry is saying the JCPOA is not enough. You have to put more pressure on Iran. So he's trying, the Democrats or the deep state or Trump's opponents, they too, alongside those Israeli firsters around him and those Zionists and those neocons around him, they too are pushing for confrontation with Iran because, in my opinion, they know that he will not come out victorious. But no one is going to oppose it. I mean, in the media, CNN, which despises Trump, they would welcome an attack. They will justify it. They will try to spin it in a way in which makes it legitimate. So the corporate media, they will support any attack, but they will be looking for Trump to take punishment as a result. So I think that Trump supporters and opponents, they wanted, many of them want an attack for differing reasons. But I think when it fails and when it doesn't achieve its results, they will start attacking Trump for those failures.
Russia had to take its respect at the barrel of a gun. When the Soviet Union collapsed, there seemed to be a lack of respect coming out of the West until now, where there's a million-man military that has been killing and dying for the last 3 years, and that is crushing effectively all of NATO with the U.S. in tow. Well, not in tow, basically lead in pack, let's be honest. Is that what Iran, like, regardless of the diplomatic part, because I agree with you, there's credibility in diplomacy, this willingness to make a deal, this willingness to make peace, with this idea of, well, yeah, we're willing to make peace, but we also believe in our sovereignty as a country. We have rights as a country. Is Iran, and I know you're not in the leadership, but I would imagine there's politicians that are talking kind of like our media space here. Is the belief that there has to be some skirmish in order to get the level of respect necessary to actually get a deal that respects that sovereignty and that is not another JCPOA? Meaning the US may have a view that is not corresponding to reality, and it requires some level of a skirmish in order to make that view meet reality, where a deal can actually take place. If that makes sense. I hope that question makes sense.
There are differing views, and there are those who say we have to be very tough. And their argument is sort of like what I was saying, that Western media will support any aggression on Iran.
They will.
If they're supporting Trump or they're opposing Trump, they'll support aggression. After all, these are the same people who don't say anything about the genocide in Gaza. The New York Times doesn't print anything about the daily slaughter. They don't print anything about the starvation siege. They talk about other things, but they won't talk about the important news because they are complicit. So they're not going to go and say, oh, an attack on Iran is not legitimate. They'll say these mullahs, they're doing this and they're evil, and the regime is a threat to the world, and they'll find justifications for everything, even though at the same time they'd like to see Trump fail. but they would like to see Iran harmed as well.
Yeah.
So these people in Iran say we have to play hardball because there's no way that you can count on any force in the United States or in the West to make these people think like human beings. And the collective support for genocide and starvation in Gaza is a clear example of the airstrikes on Yemen and so on.
Yeah.
There's another school of thought, and of course it's not clear cut, but there are those that are saying they're like the liberals. They're saying that we should be flexible and do a deal with Trump. But the problem that they have, and they're not huge in number right now, actually. I think they are I would say they're very weak compared to their position over the last couple of decades, largely because of Trump himself.
Mm-hmm.
Because ordinary people on the streets in Tehran, if you sit in a taxi or if you're in the underground, or if ordinary people say this guy's mad, he's crazy, how can you do a deal with him? So it's not as if this is something that's being discussed by scholars and academics and senior officials. People on the streets are looking at the news coming from the United States, how they're sanctioning Canada and Mexico, how they want to annex Canada, annex Panama Canal and Greenland, and how they're Trump is antagonizing Europe, and they're seeing all that. So when someone says we should do a deal with Trump, most people will say, well, how? Even if we do a deal with Trump somehow, and he doesn't stop flip-flopping for a few weeks, and then we have a deal, what's to say that you don't wake up in the morning and see something in social media where he says, I don't want this deal anymore, I'm going to do something different, even after the deal has been agreed upon. So Trump has basically discredited the liberals. And he's discredited the whole ideology of liberals, because in Iran, some of these liberals and their supporters. They've always said that, you know, the West is democratic, and even when Trump came in the first time, they say that the Western liberal democracy corrects itself, and then Trump came back in, and Biden put out a genocide, and now they really have nothing to say anymore. Liberalism has been discredited as authoritarian, brutal, barbaric in the eyes of so many people. And Trump then comes back to power and starts flip-flopping and doing what Trump does. So now the debate really doesn't evolve around the notion of appeasing Trump. That's not an option. So I think the overwhelming majority of those who are influential in Iran now are, let's say, the argument is, how tough should we be? But I think there is a strong consensus that the JCPOA is simply not enough. It was not a very good deal. There were too many loopholes that Obama took advantage of, and ultimately Trump tore it up without paying any political or other type of price for it, and that we can't go back to that. That, I think, is something that generally people agree upon. Some say no, we shouldn't be flexible at all. I don't think they're a majority, but I think they, compared to a few years ago, and because of the nature of Trump and his behavior,
Yeah.
their logic resonates more than it did before.
I see. Two more questions. Just to be very clear, removing centrifuges is off the table. That is not something that is going to be discussed. That's not something that's going to be accepted. Completely off the table in regards to negotiations.
I don't know. I have, you know, when in 2015, when I was with the nuclear negotiators in Vienna, I told the Dr. Zarif that I will only be a media advisor. I will not, get involved in negotiations.
That's correct.
3 years ago, when I went with Dr. Balgadi again to Vienna for 2-3 months, I said the same, and he agreed. So I was never involved in these issues, and I'm not involved now. They don't even have, the nature of the talks are different now. They don't have media involved at all. So I can't comment on that. There is a possibility that, for example, I'm just guessing. There is a possibility. There are scenarios where some of the centrifuges could go into, let's say, they could become deactivated but not destroyed.
Mhm.
Right? But definitely not all centrifuges. Or there could be a halt to enriching uranium at 60% or something like that. These things can happen, but destroying like parts of the nuclear program, especially Iran's newer technology, that is simply out of the question.
Okay. If you had to give an evaluation, just last question, do you think this is a bluff? Because you lay out a plan that I hear a lot of people lay out, saying this will be a catastrophe. Like, this would be just outrageous for Trump to do something like this. It's one thing to attack a country like Yemen that can't really hit you, like saying. It's another thing to attack Iran, where the consequences are radically unpredictable, not just for the US, but for the world market, not to mention the people you may kill in Iran itself. So do you think this is more of a pressure campaign with Trump pulling out of negotiations and at some point they'll come back? Or do you think, no, they are serious in the way that they are projecting themselves? I'm asking people this question because I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think anyone can answer that question clearly. But what I would say, Jamal, is that this notion of good cop, bad cop, or putting pressure on Iran to get Iran, first of all, that's not going to work. But that aside, Trump's behavior goes far beyond that. There's so many flip-flops, and there's so many contradictions on all fronts.
Mhm.
Whether, as I said, whether it's with China or the broader trade war with everyone, literally, whether it's with Ukraine, policy in Ukraine, whether it's whether it's at home in the United States and immigration and that sort of thing. It's just there's just too many things happening. There's too many contradictions to for anyone to look at it that way. I don't think there's a method in the madness. I think there may be an attempt to for them to make make some sense out of this, but they're doing it just too much.
Yeah.
They're all over the place, and so no one reads it like that. I mean, if you were if Trump, for example, was threatening you know Iran, and then at the same time negotiating, uh, then you could sort of believe that that may be a policy, even though, as I said, it wouldn't work with Iran. But when he's constantly changing, just now, he said again he'd be willing to. I don't know. I didn't see the English. I read the Persian, that he would be willing to do a deal where Iran's nuclear program is intact, but without it having a nuclear weapon. I have to go and see what he actually said.
Yeah.
Maybe you can find it right now. But the point is that he said too many different things. And then the people around him are saying different things. And then Witkoff is even saying different things. I'm not quite sure about this, but I saw a photo of the Secretary of Defense's crazy tweet.
Yes, and Wickoff liked it.
And then Witkoff apparently retweeted it.
Yep.
So, so the whole, it's an insane situation that you see in Washington. So you have all these different people, saying different things, and it's not like two things. They're all over the place, and it's on all the different issues. So I don't think there's really a method in the madness. I think it's just a lot of madness.
Yeah, just day to day. Professor, thank you for this. I didn't want to keep you long. Professor Mohammad Marandi. He is, there it is, Professor of English Literature and Orientalism at the University of Tehran. Professor, thank you for this. By the way, where can people find you? I know you're on Twitter, but I wasn't sure if you're on other social media networks.
No, I've been removed. My account on Facebook and Instagram, my accounts have been deleted a long time ago. Apparently, someone has an account in my name, and I think posts some things of mine on Facebook, but that's not my account. I don't have any account on Facebook, Instagram. I only have my Twitter account, which, by the way, it's clearly heavily shadow banned.
Mm.
But that's it. Basically, I'm on your show, and I'm on a few other very good friends like yourself, and I have my Twitter account, which I basically post clips of Gaza and the crimes being committed there, not because. And just today, someone said he doesn't look at my tweets because it bothers him a lot, and I told him I understand. The only reason why I do it is I just want people to remember that the genocide continues as we speak, during the day, every day, morning, afternoon, and night. I just want to keep reminding people. Otherwise, I don't like doing these tweets.
Mm.
But most of my tweets are about Gaza. I'm not really that active on Twitter, and most of my in-depth material is what I say on shows like yourself, your own.
Professor, thank you for this. I really do appreciate it. We had a really good crowd. We're up to 780 people, so they got to hear your voice. They got to get your take. Deeply appreciate you, man. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamal. Always a pleasure, and I hope to see you soon.
Absolutely. Have a good one. Be safe. All right, guys. Great interview by Professor. I'm going to close this. You guys have a fantastic day, and I'll see you guys bright and early in the morning. Professor, we're out. Thank you for this. I really appreciate it. I don't know what's going on either. I don't know which way it breaks. I don't know if this was all just a ploy to justify an attack, or if they legit wanted something where neocons got in his ear and started to inflame the wants. I have no idea. So I agree with you on this. I don't know where Trump's head is on this. It seems like he's all over the place. Yeah. You have a good night, okay? And thank you again for this interview. Okay. Okay. All right. And this and this and this.